Hello, my fine friends. Welcome back to a very festive episode of Destination Discourse. I'm your host, joined today. No, I'm even messing it up. It's Christmas. I've had the eggnog. I messed it up. I'm thinking ahead, not saying the right words. Let me start again.
Let's do
Welcome
that.
back to Destination Discourse. I'm your host, Stuart Butler, joined today with certainly on the naughty list, Adam Stoker.
You know what? And I absolutely am on the naughty list, so I'll start there. But I do want to let you know, Stuart,
Mm.
you've already given us a gift today. The gift of two intros for Destination Discourse. I can't think of a better gift.
But now I can't edit the flub out, right? Now that you've said that.
Exactly. I've
So
trapped you
you
now.
sort of put me into a corner. Man, I don't like that. Well, you know what? It's okay because I'm feeling good because we have a really good Christmas present for everyone today.
Yes, we
Backed by
do.
popular demand. It is the one, the only, the previous holder of the record number of listens, although she has been
Recently
dethroned.
dethroned.
Previous.
It is Emily Zertuche. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Also, Merry Christmas, everybody. I wanted to start with a pun that I found from my calendar, and it's I love our chemistry.
Very good.
And for
Yeah,
those listening,
no, no
there's
laughs.
trees. Yeah, that's amazing.
Merry
That's
Christmas.
amazing.
The gift of
That
discourse.
You are the
Doesn't get
gift
much
that
better than
keeps on giving, Emily. This is amazing. Hey, I found out, Adam, this is kind of embarrassing because I'd seen one comment a while back about someone saying they couldn't see the Stu's News lyrics. And full disclosure, when I upload this to YouTube, I don't really edit, right? I chop the beginning if there was some noise and I chop the end because we
Yep.
usually pontificate for a bit after the episode and make fun of each other in a not safe for work kind of way. And so I take those bits off, but I don't watch through the whole episode. I listen when I do the audio edit, but I don't watch. So apparently when you download from Zoom, which is how we record, you have two options. One is the gallery view where you're seeing everyone's face. The other is gallery view with screen share. And me being a cotton-headed ninny muggins has never noticed that before, and so I never downloaded with screen share. And so no one's up until this episode ever been able to see the lyrics to Stu's News before. And so I only found out last week because you remember you accidentally shared your email inbox with the world, and I was
Yes.
going to have to go in and blur it out. Well, fortunately, I didn't have to blur it out because no one saw it. But
Which I had
there you
my
go.
doubts whether or not you would actually try to do that for me, and I really appreciate the fact that you did go in and actually try to do that.
Well, I looked for it. I was gonna to be completely candid, I was gonna look and see if there was anything really incriminating or just
Zoom in on it.
embarrassing. Because if it was just
Fair.
embarrassing, I would have probably left it there. But so
Oh,
anywho.
funny.
So today, for the first time ever, if you want to queue it up and start sharing your screen, this is like the literal debut of the lyrics on
Can I,
screen on the YouTube channel.
Oh,
before we get into Stu's news, I've got to ask Emily something real quick,
Okay.
okay? So, and
ask
maybe
away.
give you some credit for something, Emily. So, a
Okay.
few weeks ago, you and I were on a call, and you showed me your brand new Meta glasses that you had and that
I
you'd
did.
been using to record and capture content. So, I ordered a pair because I was pretty excited about it, and I when I got it. I wore them to my company Christmas party. And so we had we did this jewelry making thing. It was really cool. It's a place called the Gem Studio here in Utah, and it was a really fun activity together. But I was able to capture like a lot of the tutorial from the lady that was kind of walking us through everything. I was able to capture a lot of the process, and it's literally you just click the button on the side. And it starts recording up to 3 minute clips. And we got some really fun, usable content from our Christmas party. So thank you for turning me on to the Meta glasses because they so far so good.
They are fantastic. I'm not wearing them right now, but what I love about them is for travel, it is such a great tool being able to capture anything without taking your phone out. You get to actually capture the moment. And at this point, Meta should just hire me for selling these glasses. But I'm obsessed with them. I'm obsessed with being able to listen to music at the airport, but also it's just great. I love them. But I'm
The
glad that I've gotten you to get them as well.
You did, and the audio is actually really cool. I did not
Yeah.
realize because you can literally be listening to music fairly loud or a
Yeah.
podcast or whatever, and somebody standing 2 feet from you will have no idea. They can't hear it, which is
It's
crazy.
Yeah, they're so cool. I think really any destination marketer needs to have them just for
Yep.
fun. But I will say, from a marketing standpoint, that Meta is now going to track any audio recording that you put on these when you ask it questions, because it does have AI, which is also fascinating. And it can serve you ads based on what you're talking about. And that's also creepy, but I
Yeah.
digress.
Well, they're finally just telling the truth about how they get ad context.
Yeah,
I think we've given
that's
up on
true.
any illusion of privacy, though. At this point,
At this
it's
point, my digital
convenience
footprint
trumps
is,
privacy all day, every
yeah.
day. Well, you
Yeah.
guys have made me feel like the odd one out. I need to get some of these Meta glasses now.
You're going to have to give it a try.
They're
It's really
very fun.
interesting how, when Google Glass came out, however many years ago, I mean, that's like a decade ago now, it feels like, may I literally be, how uncool it was and how much stigma there was and how people really shunned the folks who were wearing it. And so I think Google were before their time and really probably pushed this whole technology back a decade, So I'm
They
glad
did.
it's coming back. Someone that's visually impaired like myself, I can't wait for the day when there's like a head-up display or audio that's telling me who the person in front of me is, because half the time when I'm at a conference, I have no idea. So that'll be amazing.
That'll be amazing. And it's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah, it sure is.
It is.
All right, so let's do it. Let's do the Stu's news. And Adam,
Let's
you're gonna
do
have to
it.
shift because you're blocking the lyrics a little bit. So shift the other way. You're blocking it more now.
Is that better? Okay.
No, not really.
Yeah.
All right.
Duck down all
I
the
know,
way under
just-
you. Duck all the way under your desk. There you go.
There we go.
That's as long as I'll stay down there.
Hold hip.
Yeah, I hurt myself.
It's so spacey. I didn't think of it as like a galaxy spacey adventure, and now everything's
Yeah, the lyrics change it, right? They changed the tone.
Yeah.
I think what he did is he went into AI and said that this guy's a Star Wars nerd and his name's Stu, and we're doing this segment called Stu's News. It sounds like what he did.
That's
So-
exactly
Wow.
what I did.
You're so
I get it.
predictable, Adam.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
All right. So this article today is really an interesting one. I don't know if I just missed this or what happened, but apparently Thailand's been doing this promotion since July. It was July through October, called Half and Half. And basically, what's been happening is that the Thai government has been subsidizing people in Thailand, domestic travel, to travel, and they'll pay up to 50% of the cost for accommodations and in the travel expense, which is bonkers to me, right? There's a cap on it. There's a limit to the amount they'll pay per day. But they had 500,000 of these that people could apply for. And people had they had to have a national ID. They had to prove they had to travel within a certain, like there was a few hoops to jump through. But tons of people in Thailand have taken advantage of this half and half subsidy. And I only found out about it because there was an article a couple of weeks ago saying how they're getting ready to expand this out to Europe. And there's a list of European countries like France, Germany, the UK, that are going to be able to do some form of this, although it didn't seem very clear from the article I read whether or not it's going to be a 50% subsidy or if it's just more of a promotion marketing ploy. But this concept of the government literally paying people to travel is bonkers to me. And I just wonder what you guys think about it. And could you ever see a world, we're facing in 2026 that is not looking great for travel, right? The economy is still sort of struggling. We've got potential unemployment challenges coming. We've got a lot of uncertainty too between government policies. We don't really know the impact of the big, beautiful bill yet. Early indicators, at least in a lot of destinations I'm talking to, are not very pretty for 2026. So a travel subsidy is something we should consider because we're already doing it in some categories, right? We're already giving incentives for group travel, for sports incentives, things like that. So could you ever see a world where we're offering incentives for leisure travel?
Go ahead, Emily. I want to hear your thoughts before I jump in.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, especially in the world that we're in right now. Because first, travel is an economic multiplier, and it's not necessarily a handout, but what we want to see is that we are recovering at a rate that we need to, because if you look at the charts on how far we're declining in terms of travel from an economic standpoint, it's massive. And I think about there's other different countries that have done this. I think Japan did a go-to travel, and I can't remember what it was called, but they did a program that was very similar to what is going on right now. And I mean, like if you even think about Canada, and they did the targeted incentives, but just for regional
Hmm.
dispersal of getting the region to start traveling a little bit more and have this allocation of funds. But I definitely think that this is a possibility, especially in the age of AI, and that's a whole other topic. But when you think about how there may be a competing voice for which destinations are going to get more of the share versus which are not, it's going to very much show how much that we need to be able to disperse the spend and disperse how we can equitably raise economic impact from a travel perspective. And incentives may be the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I've got a lot of thoughts about this, and in fact, I think I could probably talk for an entire episode about it because I think there's a lot of interesting nuance in this story. I mean, we talk all the time on this show about going back to first principles with any of our decision making. And one of the things that we talk about really frequently is that our purpose as a DMO is to make the lives of the residents better, right? The residents that we serve. And one of the things that I think a lot of residents complain about is that the tourism industry is not built for them, and that for example, you get a lot of markets where locals feel priced out of a market, and they can't go eat dinner at some of the places that the wealthy people that come into town can go eat at and stuff like that. And so the fact that Thailand put together a campaign that subsidizes locals' ability to experience travel and tourism within Thailand, I think there is a ton of value in the relationship between the DMO and the individual or the resident that they serve. And I think it's very tangible value that's probably going to generate a lot of goodwill between the residents and the tourism industry. And so I like that a lot. The other thing that I found interesting is I think that anytime the economy starts to contract, the radius within which you can attract visitation is going to shrink. It's just the way it works. And I remember back in 2008 when we were in the middle of the economic crisis of 2008, that staycations were the big thing, right? And every destination was suddenly advertising staycations, and so now you had people, competing for local travelers or at least, regional travelers. And I feel like subsidizing that is a great way to incentivize those higher propensity travelers to actually book a trip to the destination. So I think there's a lot of interesting things. I think the one thing that's going to be really challenging is if you've positioned yourself as a luxury destination and then you start to discount, I think you're going to have some real challenges from a branding perspective. And I definitely want to stay
Las
intellectually,
Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to stay intellectually consistent
Yeah.
with what I said about Las Vegas, right? Because I felt like they were saying one thing, but then their actions were something else. And I think that would be my one hesitation is if you've branded yourself that way, throwing out discounts is going to hurt your brand in the long term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
What did
I
you say to
like,
that, Emily?
yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to make sure that it's the residents that we're focusing on and not necessarily the visitors, because a subsidy should be, and its intention should be to stabilize jobs, stabilize their local economy. It should be a resident first approach for it to get them to a baseline. So this is almost like something that needs to happen based on something that was um, something that needed to be fixed. And that's what they're doing now is, yes, we should use travel to subsidize the jobs to support local businesses and being able to give residents access to something that they can benefit from.
Yeah, and let me add to that, Emily, because how angry do people get when you see major organizations get a bailout of some sort from the government, right? But
Yeah.
when we're talking about individuals receiving subsidy for travel, it's going to feel to the residents also like it's going directly to the resident, and there's not some big boogeyman that's getting the big check, even though that money is going to pass through the traveler and into some of the corporations that are going to benefit from it. I think from a PR perspective, subsidizing experiences for the local residents is just such a better way from a PR perspective to do that than it would be to bail out a company that's struggling, that's
Yeah.
important to the economy.
So let me take the opposing view on this a little bit, because I don't know that I'm fully tracking what you guys are saying. There are already things in place in a lot of destinations like locals discounts, right? People, if you're local, shows up to an attraction in Myrtle Beach. I mean, you and I did it at Popstroke, Adam. Even though you weren't a local, we showed up there and I said, "Hey, do you have a locals discount?" and showed my ID, and we both got a discount when we played. So
Yeah.
I feel like there are already incentives for locals in a way, and to expect a large enough volume of locals to stay in accommodations to make a meaningful impact, I don't think it's realistic. I think you can sort of offer restaurants, attractions, things like that, but at the end of the day, our residents would benefit from this on the reciprocal, right? Because if it was a US wide incentive, then now every person in our locale would get the incentive to travel somewhere else. So they'd see the benefit in terms of, it's essentially, it's not far away from a universal basic income, right? It's basically, hey, we're going to give you a stipend so that you can afford to travel, is what we're doing. But everyone universally would get it. I think what adds complexity to the US is just the vastness of the US, the differences between states in the US. A country that's obviously smaller, like a Thailand, or any of the European countries, it's a lot easier to roll out something universally than it is here. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I get where you guys are coming from in terms of we want to take care of our residents, but our residents will be the ones for the benefit indirectly from having stable jobs and all the stuff that Emily talked
Right.
about, and owning the
Right. It's almost
businesses and
like,
stuff.
I feel like it's almost putting a Band-Aid on something that was an issue. So, the reason that they would go to these means of temporary subsidy is likely due to what's going on that's incorrect. So is there an over inflation of tourism in certain areas, or is there just rising costs and now people can't travel? Like there's just so many different things, and this is one of the buttons that they press to try to fix it. It's but it doesn't fix the problem that happened in the first place.
Right, which is travel is priced a lot of people out of the market, right? Which is what we're seeing, right? It's people don't have the means to travel. So do we become like the dairy industry over here, where there's just now permanent subsidies, but what does that do over the long term? It just drives the price up even more, right? So
Agreed.
I don't know that I love this. I mean, I like it from a campaign perspective, similar to, we talked about potentially Las Vegas was either a really bad idea or a really good idea, depending on how much perspective you have. But I think time will tell on that. I think with this, I couldn't see it rolling out nationally here in the US in the same way. But I do think at a local level, could a destination take it on the chin and do some kind of kitschy, novel campaign, which is playing with this idea of paying people to come to their destination? Like that's kind of an interesting place for me to explore.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I want to be clear. My suggestion was not that I believe that the U.S. could roll something like this out, but I also disagree with some of your argument as to why not. I mean, the pop stroke experience that we had, that was a one-off, but I don't think very many destinations have like a memorialized locals only value structure. Like there's not infrastructure for that
I
in a
mean, it's
lot of.
not. Yeah, I don't think even in Myrtle Beach, right? It's not a universal one. Like it's sort of up to the individual proprietor. But I would say 80% plus of our local businesses do offer some kind of local discount. It's not consistent, but
And
we're unique, right? Because we're such a tourist destination. But
Well,
I
you
bet
are,
if you went to Panama City Beach or Virginia Beach, you'd probably see something similar.
but 90% of destinations are not true resort towns, kind of like
No, you're not going to go to New
or
York probably and have these kind of incentives,
and so I think this infrastructure for local benefit, I think is an opportunity for destinations at the individual level. Because I most definitely agree with you. Like I don't think the United States of America can roll out a U.S. residence campaign that has the infrastructure to support it. I'm not suggesting that, but I do think that destinations, if we're trying to add value to our residents, coming up with programs that the destination can demonstrate the value that they're bringing to the residents through that program, I think that's great. But the other thing that I would say, Stuart, is we're going into a year where international travel, and we're going to talk to Amir Elon about this in the next couple of weeks on the show, but international travel looks like it's going to be down for next year. And so it is something where the only people we can mobilize if international travel is down are the residents of the United States, and we need to increase travel volume if we want to get the industry to maintain where it's at. And so I do think exploring ways to mobilize US residents for travel, even if they're going to be going outside of an individual destination, I think it's worth exploration. What I
Yeah.
don't love is anytime you roll out a program like that, the likelihood of efficiency is probably pretty low. And so,
My thoughts
it might be
exactly.
utopian in that view.
You mean government's not good at solving problems? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, they're so great at solving problems, especially in the travel sector.
Yeah. I will also give a nod. I was looking at our data earlier this week, Adam. We have about 10% of our listeners are from Canada now and about 10% from the UK. And then there's another 10% from a variety of countries too. So we talk a lot about the US here, but 25% plus of our audience is non-US based. So we might
And
need to
of the
broaden.
UK, how many have the last name Butler? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it's my mom, my dad, my brothers. No, I don't. We don't have that level of visibility. But I honestly don't think my family listens to this or cares about it too much because none of them are in hospitality, and they barely tolerate me. I mean, they kicked me out of the country for goodness sake. So All right, let's get to the present for today.
Let's do it.
It's a Christmas episode. Emily has brought the goods as she always does on the show. I feel like we're gonna have to have like Emily on like as a recurring character because she always comes with a hot take or two. She's
Well,
not
and
not
full
afraid to
disclosure,
pull her punches.
she submitted a few, right? We picked one,
Yeah,
so we do need
Yeah.
to get the rest of them back on. So I like the recurring idea.
He asked me,
absolutely.
what do you want to rant about? And I said, just give me a topic and I'll find an argument. But no, this argument is definitely close to my heart, especially in the work that I do every day. And this is a conversation on Merry Christmas, data vendors. We're going to talk on data vendors today. And
I mean, that's what everyone really was hoping for under the Christmas tree
yeah,
this morning.
it's funny because we have so many close relationships with every data vendor, and it's hard to talk through a systematic problem, but there is, and it's a huge problem. And I think it's more important now than ever in the age of AI, where we're progressing so much to communicate narratives, that this is a critical time to really look at ourselves as destination marketers.
Cool.
So I just want to start with the key problem. It's that we have an overabundance in data. We know that. We have so many different vendors that are talking to us. I actually just came back from eTourism Summit Marketplace in DC, where I sped network with multiple data vendors that are offering a promise, that are offering the ROI, that are offering, all of these things. And I told Adam, I feel like this is a data hangover. This is an over instrumentation and overabundance and over of everything. It's so much that you end up hungover. And it's not that it's a lack of information, because it's very sophisticated. There's so many different ways that we have this over instrumentation. But if you look at an organization, they are also suffering from the data hangover. We're all suffering in many ways. And it's not that we don't have the tools, because we literally have dozens. We have reports, we have dashboards, we have models. Each one is a totally rational purchase in the moment because it solves a specific problem at a specific time. And incrementally, they make our organization smarter. So if every individual decision was rational, how does the collective system end up being, for lack of a better word, dumb? Because the accumulation leads to a system that knows so much more than we internally, as we go into a board meeting, than we can calmly explain. So that volume of measurement and that volume of data and all of these different silos and so many different definitions of all of this data becomes impossible to tell a single story of just cause and effect. And what happens is us as, when we go into a boardroom, that paralysis can kick in, because that data hangover, it ends up becoming only a full-blown crisis when someone asks that very, very simple question that, for whatever reason, we're very scared to answer as DMOs. Did it work?
Mm-hmm.
Did it work? And a DMO, like we can produce a mountain of data points to answer that question. We have charts, we have graphs, we have all of these things, but for whatever reason, it is very difficult for all of us, and sometimes including myself, to give a single coherent answer to that one question. And what's so interesting about this is that it's really not a new problem for us, and it's not necessarily a data problem. It's more so of a meaning problem. And I think history, and it has taught us many times that this is a pathway for collapse of our industry, potentially as we know it. And Adam, to your point, you mentioned the 2008 crisis. So I want to touch on that you think about the 2008 financial crisis, which everyone remembers as a failure of risk modeling, an overabundance of data of the CDOs, of you. If anyone has seen The Big Short, Ryan Gosling, when he's with his stack of Jenga blocks and moving out the CDOs and throwing them in the trash, what happens? It crumbles, right? And I think it's not necessarily an overabundance of the data. It's that we had all these financial instruments, for us, we have all of these data instruments, and they have multiplied faster than our ability to govern them or to even understand them. And I think that these models are getting more sophisticated than the assumptions that they were built on. So when the simple question of did it work, that explanation of risk, it collapses, and that can collapse the whole entire system with it. So this is the exact spot I think that many of our DMOs find ourselves in. Like, we have all these fancy tools, we have tons of data vendors, we have all these relationships, but our measurement capacity has outrun our narrative coherence. So it brings us back to
I
this
love the wording of that.
time. And, just for the sake of the analogy of the data hangover, I want to introduce a heuristic, the whiskey and Coke test. So this is the test. If a system can't simply explain itself simply to someone who hasn't built it, it will eventually lose legitimacy. So this is more so of a communications test, not necessarily a technical one. So the moment of truth is, if a board or a city council member asks you, did it work? They're not asking for a giant over-sweetened cocktail. They're not asking for a data dump of, oh, here are the impressions, here's the ROI, here's the cause and effect, here's all the things. And it's so much because we're panicking and we're over-explaining this over-sweetened cocktail of complex ingredients that went into the measurement. And your board is sitting there and nodding, but inside they're just thinking, I really just wanted a whiskey and Coke. And that whiskey and Coke is demand for a simpler truth, because how did we get there? What did we spend? What did we get back? And more importantly, how sure are you in what you're presenting me? I need a whiskey and Coke. I don't want this super complex answer. And I don't think it's anti-intellectual. I think it's more so anti-obfuscation. It's more like you don't want to be obscure. They don't want obscurity because they want you to translate your results into a political and fiscal reality, because they're the ones that are going to need to advocate for you as a DMO. And a DMO that survives that is the one that's practiced that translation over and over. But if you can't do it, your lump of all these data vendors and this internal system that you've created, no matter how shiny, will eventually lose the confidence it needs to survive. So that's the main thing I've been thinking about and ranting on in my brain as I have all of these different things. But now I'm going to go deeper into my main piece of discourse, where I was trying to understand, why is this a problem? How did we get here? And don't punish me for being a CMO, but I really think the foundational problem is the marketing funnel.
Wow.
So the funnel.
Can we take a little breath,
Yes.
and like just process a little bit before we jump into that? Because I'm really intrigued about you going at the funnel being the problem, because we've had this conversation before. Adam's a massive fan of funnels, and I hate them with a passion. So I can't wait to hear you agree with me and disagree with Adam. But Adam, I mean, Powerful stuff, right? What do you take out of that Emily just shared? And,
Well,
and again, Merry Christmas to everyone. Like, well, you didn't expect your brain was going to be working this hard today for
yeah.
sure. But wow,
Yeah,
this
a
is great.
Christmas thought exercise like this is great. So Emily, I think you've
Mm.
identified one of the biggest threats to the future of our industry is how I would describe it. Because I think you talk about the overabundance of data. And one of the things that I think has happened is there's so many data points available that you can actually pick the narrative first and construct the data points that
Right.
make your narrative correct. And when
Correct.
you think about why these vendors, and by the way, this is not the vendor's fault as far as I see it. I don't think there was anything nefarious. It's destinations wanted more data to tell a specific story and demonstrate value to their board. But this is where we've talked about on the show for the last few weeks the difference between true relevance and the illusion of relevance. And I really believe that a lot of the data points that we've been using as an industry has been to prop up the illusion of relevance when we're missing whether or not we're actually making a positive impact on the community. And a lot of
Right.
these data vendors were getting requests for, well, tell me about this data so that I can see how it ties off with the objective that we were trying to reach. And it got so much, and I love your whiskey and Coke analogy because it's like it's gone so far with the volume of data that then when we go try to explain it, we're forgetting to say, and all of this drove this additional visitation
Right.
that
Right.
benefited you, right?
Yes.
And so I really feel like if we continue on this trajectory of because the number of data points will continue to expand, and if we present data that ties to a narrative that doesn't result with the whiskey and Coke at the end, then I
Yeah.
think what we're going to end up on is a house of cards, just like you described with Ryan Gosling pulling out the Jenga blocks. I do think that's what we're building towards if we don't
Yeah.
reverse course to focus on the data that implies impact and relevance, not
So
the illusion thereof.
I agree with everything Emily said, everything you just said, but I I think, and I want to hear why you blame the funnel itself, the marketing
Yeah.
funnel, because I sort of blame the institution a little bit, the
Me too.
organizations. There's a saying in the industry which is sort of a badge of honor, but I think it's actually a chink in our armor. And people say when you've seen one DMO, you've seen one DMO, right?
Yeah.
And we're sort of proud of that in a way that everyone's slightly unique, but therein lies our weak underbelly because there isn't consensus and agreement on what our value proposition is or what function we should provide in
Right.
the ecosystem. And obviously there's challenges because of the different scale of different organizations and in the ecosystem we actually live in. But I think there needs to be a better concerted effort to form some form of core agreement on what we are, what we do, why we exist. Not the
Yeah.
semantic argument about what we're called, right? But what is the value we actually drive, and putting KPIs around that. I'm reading a book right now called Pivot, and it's um, no, it's not called Pivot. It's called Reset. Sorry. So go buy the book Pivot. I'm sure it's fine. I haven't read it. There's a book called Reset.
I'm gonna
Um,
write that down.
and in it, there's a quote, and I forget who it's attributed to, but it basically says every system is perfectly designed to get the results it's getting, you know, which I
Yes.
think is the problem with the DMO space. Like we're perfectly designed to have the sort of selective amnesia about what matters so that we can push forward what moves our agenda forward. And
Yes.
by us, I mean individuals within the organization as much as the organization itself. So whether that be looking good to your board or to an elected official or stakeholder, we give people the information we think they want to protect our existence and protect our funding and protect
Yes.
our status, right? And so I think that's why I feel like it's probably, to me at least, more organizational than it is necessarily the marketing funnel. But I'd love to
Right.
hear your thesis
But
on why it's the
before
marketing
we
funnel.
get to the marketing funnel, though, Emily, you said something that I just want to see if you remember it because it was so profound that I wanted to write it down and I missed it. It was right before you introduced the heuristic of the whiskey and Coke.
Whiskey and
You
Coke.
Yeah, right before that, you kind of summarized your thoughts and I want to reuse the term. I totally want to steal it. So I want to remember, like, how did you wrap that up? Do you remember that?
Narrative coherence.
Yes. Now tell me the full statement because I'm writing it down.
Yeah. Um, it is that with the fancy tools that we have and all of this measuring ability, all of that measurement capacity is outrun the negative or the narrative coherence because we have such an over inundation of data, just like the 2008 financial crisis, just like the Roman Empire. Why did they collapse? Why did the Roman Empire collapse? It wasn't a logistical issue, it was a narrative issue because they had every single system put in place that was correct. They had the political side of things correct. Their tax system was great. Everything was great. Why is it that they were overrun and why did it collapse? It was because of the narrative coherence. It was the leaders that were arguing this narrative to their community, and they weren't arguing it appropriately. They didn't do it right, and that led to its collapse. So it was more of a narrative problem before it became a logistical problem. Same as the 2008 financial crisis, where we had so much data that we couldn't understand or comprehend. But how does that start? That starts with the narrative, and that starts with how are you explaining it? And the failure of explaining risk was what led to the demise.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
And
now
I
I got
think
to
it's
go
a
read
great
up on that.
analogy and a great parallel. And I think you're right. You know, that we talk a lot on the show about signal to noise ratio. And I think we are creating a lot of the noise as DMOs, right? We're
Sure.
sort of throwing data and KPIs at people, thinking it's answering questions or at least obfuscating the truth in a way that's beneficial
Yeah.
to us. But we're missing that clarity on what really matters, right? How do we get down to brass tacks? When someone says, "Did it work?" Well, what do you mean by work, right? What we need to define that and agree on what
Yeah.
that means before
Right.
we can start measuring it, you know? And so I think that's the missing step. So let's keep moving. Let's plow ahead. You've already hurt my brain a ton today. I was not expecting my brain to be working. It's good because the brain
Merry
burns
Christmas.
calories. So I'm burning a ton of
Yeah, you
calories.
get all that egg,
Um,
all that cookies.
that's right. So let's go. Let's attack Adam's defense of the marketing funnel.
Well, I'll tell you, Adam, that like I've always been like if you know me and in my world, I always talk about the marketing funnel. I love the marketing funnel, love it, love it. But the more I've gotten to be in this seat from a standpoint of talking to our elected officials and our leaders, the more I'm starting to question the funnel of it even being something that I can even talk through. And is it actually weaponizing my story? So I had a lot of talk on this. So maybe Adam, today's the day I convince you to go over to the other side because and this is coming from a CMO. So the funnel, it's basically imported from e-commerce. So there, first and foremost, let's talk about that. It's imported for e-commerce and it carries these conceptual errors that just don't apply to our complex systems. It assumes that two things are almost never true in destination marketing, which is that linear progression of cause and effect. Like, oh, here we go. Like I did X and now you're going to do this, like a checkout flow on a website. Like you got something and you checked out. All of my Amazon gifts are arriving before Christmas. You see, you click and you convert. But deciding on a vacation or really any big life decision, getting married, buying a house, it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. A vacation decision, it doesn't behave like a checkout flow. It behaves like this probabilistic modeling. I don't know. It behaves like what it looks like outside, like it's cloudy today in Corpus Christi. It behaves like weather. The influence to visit is absorbed gradually and over a really long period. And a person's decision to travel, it falls into so many different categories. It's a social reason, it's emotional, it's logistical, planning out what time. It's all tangled up and it's not this neat straight line. It's like It's spaghetti. So a big marketing, it's like spaghetti with maple syrup, might I add. So a big
The only way to
marketing,
eat
We're
spaghetti
sticking
on
with
Christmas.
Elf.
we're
It's
sticking with
Christmas.
Elf,
Yeah.
also my favorite Christmas movie.
Hmm.
Okay, so a big marketing campaign, it's not like a discount code. It doesn't cause an immediate sale. It's alerting you, or it's like we have to alter the weather conditions to get them to come in. So we're cloud seeders, okay. But what I'm saying
Well,
is
you heard it here first.
what I'm saying is you're changing the conditions to make a certain decision feel more favorable over time. So you're choosing it over time. And this literally means that you have to shift your entire mental model from the funnel, because a funnel is a lever pull. And if you're just slightly changing the likelihood that someone's going to visit your destination, the effects are therefore going to be delayed or diffused or tangled up in this maple spaghetti with a dozen other external forces. And you can't measure a weather system with a single thermometer. You can't measure a probability field with simple funnel metrics. And that is a shift from funnel to the field. It leads to directly to the core problem of what our measurement needs to be. And here's another term that I thank you, ChatGPT. This is what gave me this. It's establishing counterfactual probability. So that is the game. That is the entire game for serious attribution. The goal is not to describe what happened, it's to determine the counterfactual. It's the what if. What if we did nothing? What if we didn't invest $1 million on that marketing campaign? That is the only honest question, because that is the one question that most dashboards alone are completely unequipped to answer. They can only show us the world that did happen, not the counterfactual, because the counterfactual world is unobservable. So you have this model, and you have to create the synthetic baseline of what would have been, and that requires like just a lot of humility, honestly, that most organizations are trying to avoid.
Yeah. Well, the actual incremental value we drive to a market is infinitesimal, right, compared to the scale of the actual market. And so
Right.
people aren't they're quick to claim an ROI based on the full scale, but it's less impressive to go from a 200 to 1 ROI to a 3 to 1 ROI if you're actually looking at the incrementality.
Yeah.
But that's our job. We actually just we're sort of analyzing our funding right now, and sort of as a community we're talking through what's the appropriate amount to invest in marketing versus product development and other stuff. And so we actually did this counterfactual analysis with tourism economics, and sort of have gone through hypothetically where would we be today had we not invested what we've invested. And
Right.
it's really hard, and you have to make a ton of assumptions that,
Right.
anytime you make assumptions or build a model, that there's inherent flaws in it, right? There's a lack of
Yep.
precision in it. So
Yeah.
how do you propose, you know, because the stuff, I have a degree in physics, and some of the stuff you're saying today is stretching my brain, right? And so I would imagine the smaller DMOs that don't have a physics degree are probably listening to this and saying, I don't know where to begin. Like, this is really hard stuff. Like, I don't necessarily know if I agree or disagree with you, but I certainly know that I don't know what to do with this information. So if we're getting prescriptive about how do we move forward, we sort of defined a problem that I agree with
Yeah.
100%. And especially because it shuts Adam up about the funnel.
Okay, I got to defend
But
myself on this funnel thing at this point, Stuart. I've let this go on long enough. I most definitely do not ascribe to the traditional marketing funnel, and I encourage anyone who doesn't
I feel
believe that to
like go
go back
back
and
to an episode
listen.
where we
Yeah,
we actually had this
yeah,
conversation.
go back and listen a year and a half ago to my
Mhm.
original statements on that. I
Yeah.
actually have completely, and I want to get to your answer, Emily, but I've completely changed how I look at the marketing funnel. Actually, that I believe it's a simple math equation, and the way I've
Yeah.
talked about it is attention plus trust equals action.
I've
And if you
seen
can get people's attention, use it to build trust, you're going to get them to take action. But Emily, you've actually illustrated for me in this conversation that there's something missing from my math equation here,
Yes.
and that's circumstances. So,
Yes.
like, I may want to visit Paris someday, right? And I've already been convinced. They've already got my attention. I already trust that it's going to be a great experience, but I can't afford it. And I most definitely don't have the vacation time for it with trying to build a business and all that kind of stuff right now, right? So circumstances is something that we don't have any control over,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a really important factor in whether or not someone's going to visit. So I actually think it's attention, trust, and circumstances is going to
Yeah.
lead to action. And I believe that much, much more than I believe in any marketing funnel, even if
Mm-hmm.
Stuart says
Yeah.
otherwise.
Well, I think opportunity is probably a better word than circumstance. Just
Yeah.
being playing a little semantics with you. But how in the world do you measure that stuff? Right?
Yeah.
We're talking about we have
Right.
too much data, right? How do you measure the opportunity? How do you measure the trust? How do you measure
Right.
the
And
the
isn't that
attention?
that's so paradoxical in nature that the more data we have, the more these realizations are coming to fruition.
Hmm. Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think what's interesting is we look at all of this as causation or not causation, but correlation, because you have beginning and end. But causation for us, and to your point, Stuart, on these modelings, it requires this crazy act of wonder, of
Hmm.
imagination. We have to imagine a world that never happened. And most organizations resist that because a simple, precise number feels safe.
Hmm.
So a dashboard that spits out a single ROI number, like eight to one, I don't know. It feels authoritative. It feels like I know what I'm talking about. It gives me something I can say to my board and feel proud of. But a smart model or a range that gives you a range, let's say it's 3 to 1 and 7 to 1, like we think it's between this and that. What happens is it admits its own uncertainty, which can feel very vulnerable and weak. But think about the most prestigious disciplines in the world: medicine, economics, politics. They all live and breathe this probabilistic modeling or reasoning, right? They embrace uncertainty because they know it's honest. But for us, we have resistance in our world because it feels political. It feels like if we think precision is going to get us more funding, we think by being precise, we're going to get more funding. And we're like, that's it. That's what we're going to do. But the core realization that I've had by really thinking about this is that false precision is so much more dangerous than uncertainty because
Yeah.
it's a lie.
Well, it's a lie. In the long term, you might get caught out. But I think what you've already stated, and which I agree with, is the narrative, the coherent narrative, is more important than the data itself, right? As long as we can tell the right story to the right people, but there's the Jenga blocks, right? Because at
Right.
some point you can't defend the story you're telling, or at least it's built on a lie, like you're saying. So, man, this
But
is
to me that says the metrics that you track to tell your story should be tied specifically to the value the resident business stakeholders and political
Right.
stakeholders receive from your efforts. And
Right.
everything
but
beyond that
okay,
is an
unpack
assumption.
that. Unpack that, right? We can measure the amount of spend in market, right? We can measure tax collections. We can measure how many bookings and our occupancy. But how do you measure causality? How do you measure the influence we had? Because I
You
would
don't.
argue to you, where was the last place you went on vacation?
Myrtle Beach.
But vacation. You were working when you were here. We put you to work.
We went to Scottsdale.
Okay. Tell me in order everything that influenced the decision to go to Scottsdale.
Easy. Morgan Wallen had a concert in Scottsdale.
All
And
right.
that's
So the DMO had no influence. Let's do a different one, right? Because I know you went to
Look, Stuart,
Fiji, right?
what you're getting to though is I'm going to tell you no DMO has ever influenced my travel decision.
You don't think Fiji DMO did?
So you are pretty much calling the kettle black and saying we're right.
Well, what do you mean?
Because,
Or he's saying we're irrelevant and we
or
need
are
to
you saying we're
disappear.
right? What's the point of anything anymore,
Yeah.
Adam?
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that I specifically, am the barometer for every destination marketing organization either, right? So the
Yeah.
fact that I've made my decisions based off of different things, I don't think that means all
I,
DMOs are
but I think
irrelevant.
you're
That's
illustrating the point, Adam. I think you don't know what influenced you. Why did you
Right.
have this love affair with Fiji, right? You had this picture in your
You
mind
want to know
of
why?
how beautiful
Because
it
I wanted
was.
to go to Bora Bora and it was too expensive. So I looked for the next closest experience.
How did we know
So
that that's when you changed your mind though? And
yeah,
that's
how do you know that? How do you
so
know it wasn't when you bought this agency and then that put you in a specific financial bracket that then there's your opportunity side, right? The circumstances that we're
right.
talking about. So I think the point is we don't even know what's influencing our decisions. So there's no way a DMO could ever measure the
Then
direct
how do you
impact they're
communicate
having,
value?
you
Right.
know?
Right.
How do you
And
communicate value?
well,
Exactly.
let me back up a little bit because we're talking, I mean, we can all collectively agree that we're operating in these very complex open systems, very
Hmm.
complex. But the
Hmm.
problem is we have a desire to over credit or have over attribution when we talk about these numbers because we just want to conveniently ignore that we are operating in a complex system and then we rely on a funnel. And
Hmm.
I think that's a huge piece of what's going on with communicating the value and communicating these stories because you mentioned causation. Like this is the question that a stakeholder asks of data at work is a causal question. It's not a data question. They're asking a causal question and you're responding with data.
Mm.
And part of me is like, yes, there is data, like it's great, but we need to have more of, I guess, humility that we need to acknowledge the uncertainty because if you're just saying a precise number and you're not being humble about it, you're literally just putting on a performance. And a performance is designed to make people feel good, right? You want to make people feel good and be like, oh, hurrah, hurrah, here's what we got. But that's not actually informing a decision. And it's not going to survive cross-examination if it is a bad number. And if you are being questioned, because you need something defensible. You're not pulling a number like you can't just pull a big number out of a dashboard because we're not here to sell a number. We're here to sell the logic that produced the number. So if I give you a single number and someone else, let's say you grab from a different vendor that you got a completely different number, like, oh, ROI said this over here, ROI said this over here. And I give you, let's say, the top number, my credibility of having that number can collapse, like me as someone that's presenting it. But if I give you a range and I say, well, here are the three key assumptions that create this range, now we can have a real conversation. Now you can interrogate my logic because that's the only currency of credibility that really matters is give me an assumption of a range and be honest and humble that there are so many different ways to get that. Because if you give false precision, it's going to lead to mistrust.
Yeah. Wow.
I want
Like,
to,
I mean, you got me really noodling this because I think
yeah,
you're articulating the moment we're in as an industry, right? This is the sort of existential crisis that we're all wrestling with and
It
trying
is
to figure out
existential.
our purpose and our role in the universe a little bit. I don't think we're going to solve it today. We're right at the hour mark. So I think we're going to have to sort of put a little bit of a bow on this and then wrap it up and maybe pick it up on the next time you come on the show. It's really tough for me to think through this because when you say things like it's a performance, like I go and I've seen it. Like I've seen DMOs that literally that's what they're doing. They're playing a
Yeah.
role and a character in that, and sometimes everyone's complicit in that. Sometimes the board are complicit in that. The elected officials are complicit in that. Sometimes they're
Yeah.
not. Sometimes there are an audience that does not want to be played to, and that's where we end up in the situations where defunding happens. So I,
Right.
I think I think this is a conversation. I want to invite other people to the table
yeah.
and to continue this conversation. I think
And
it's
yeah.
fascinating.
I think, the biggest mistake that we want to do is collapse this complexity of our data vendors and say, oh, well, just give me like a one magical machine, right? And the thing
Hmm.
is, they're all different. And there's no such thing as, and this is something I can't stand is when I hear the words real data. There's no such thing as real data. It's all modeled. It's modeled completely
Hmm. Yeah.
differently every single time. Um, so I think what we need to really look at is governance within our data stack. And that is creating layers so that you develop a narrative that makes sense for the data that you have and make that truth. Because if you don't have governance within your own data, it is very easy to pull cherry pick certain numbers that make no sense. You have different data vendors. One is your first layer of all of the geolocation vendors, these data vendors for ROI, impressions, measurement, social tools. The second layer is going to be the modeling. So that's your tourism economics, that's your Longwoods International, that's your qualitative and quantitative. But the top layer is that narrative. Pull what makes sense, make sure you observe it, and be real with it, and provide reasoning behind why you had those numbers. And I really think that's the blueprint. It's finding meaning and governance of your data before it collapses. And the best way to do this, in my opinion, is AI now, with the AI race and all of these different methodologies for an AI to feed into anything that you have. It's not going to operate like we think a visionary of an AI. It's not going to be a visionary. It's going to be a prosecutor. It's going to cross-examine any discrepancies in your data, and it's going to provide you everything that it sees that's wrong. I found two discrepancies. Which one's accurate? I found this. They're not going to look at hierarchy. They're not going to respect your hierarchy or what your narrative is. They're going to give you truth. And that's where I think it's really important that we really think about, how is AI going to influence every single tech stack? How are we going to be able to govern it so that we are providing a very accurate narrative? And how can we explain it clearly, coherently, and honestly? And I think that's what we just need to take away from this, is be thinking about that.
I'm going to give you some homework, Emily. I want you to go and figure all this out, and then come back in a few weeks.
That's your gift to everyone.
And then give us the answer to these amazing questions that you posed. I will tell you, I feel like we've had Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and Festivus all in one episode today. So regardless of your faith and beliefs, I think this is a gift to everyone. This is amazing. Adam, you have any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, and I'll keep it fairly brief. Number one, I think I kind of got caught up in the moment and said that no DMO has influenced my purchase decisions. That's not true. I'm sure that DMOs have created the inspiration that's led me to book my
I hear
trips.
the backtracking. It's okay.
I definitely said something that I don't agree with, that I should have said. So I definitely don't. I do want to walk that back.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I want to say, though, Emily, is what you brought up at the end just now in your last statement is what will cause the house of cards to crumble if we don't make a change. And that's the fact that every stakeholder, every mayor, every hotelier is going to be able to take these dashboards and reports that everybody is submitting as their source of truth.
Yeah.
Run it through ChatGPT or whatever platform, Gemini, whatever they're using, and ask it to find the discrepancies. And then if you chose your narrative before you chose your data, that's going to be exposed like crazy. And so the time is coming a lot quicker than a lot of us think, that if we're not truly reporting on impact, and by the way, and you guys illustrated this for me very clearly, it's very difficult to measure impact. Like, how do you measure inspiration, and how do you measure what attention you got, and all of that? And I totally agree with that. But you better not be saying that you did in your reports and saying that that's gospel truth, because that will get exposed when they leverage AI, who's smarter than most of the humans sitting in the room, and is going to be able to figure out where you went wrong. So, Emily, I think what you're bringing to us is the existential problem that we have to solve. And I appreciate you bringing it forward, because it brought to the front lines for me for sure. I wish I had the solution.
Right.
Go build it, Adam. You can sell it to the industry.
Build it. Yeah. I mean,
sure. Yeah, no problem.
We'll give you a couple of weeks. Emily, any final thoughts from you before we wrap up?
Final thoughts are, I am very excited for Christmas. I'm going to be at home with my fireplace tuned up, even though I'm in South Texas, and it's going to be a really great time. So I just wish everyone a very Merry Christmas.
Good for
Merry
you.
Christmas
Merry
to
Christmas.
you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We would love a present from you this Christmas, which would be to leave a review, a like, a share, or just tell a friend about it. Like, I gotta believe this episode needs to be the number one listened to episode. I think that we've gotten deeper into the root cause of some of our challenges today than we ever have before. And so, Emily, anytime you want to come back on the show, you are definitely welcome. And hopefully everyone's brain doesn't hurt for the rest of the day noodling on this, but it gives us a lot of thought as we head into the new year, and hopefully we'll start solving some of these problems I think we do it more by having this discourse, having this open dialogue, coming together, bringing smart people like Emily to the table, and just having honest conversation. I think that's the start of the solution. So thank you, everyone. Until next time, this has been Destination Discourse.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.